The Corsair K100 RGB has absolutely everything you could ever need in a keyboard, even if you didn't know you needed it. The only issue is, have you seen the price tag? It's $230. That's insane. Corsair must be taking notes from the custom mechanical keyboard hobby because things are getting pretty pricey nowadays. Look at the stupid number of features wrapped up into this keyboard and see if it even justifies the $230 price tag, because that's a steep price for a lot of people. The first thing you might be wondering about this keyboard is the wheel. Not the volume wheel. That's over here. I'm talking about the control wheel. This thing has so many features wrapped up into it, it's pretty. There's a lot of things you can do with it, so let's take a look at some of these. I've never really seen a design like this on a mechanical keyboard before. The closest I've seen is the SteelSeries Apex 7 and Apex Pro, but that doesn't have nearly the amount of functionality that this bad boy has. Keep in mind the software download is like 500 megabits, so make sure you have a little extra space on your drive before you make the commitment to download the software. You can use the software and control wheel to set up so many different awesome things, such as RGB lighting, music, macro keys, change between applications, and so much more. Corsair is pretty ambitious with this design and it paid off for them. I could see this being really helpful for music producers, video editors, anyone who does any application-heavy processes on their computer. This keyboard is like a dream. There's so much utility wrapped up in it. At first, the software and the control wheel are pretty overwhelming. There's so much stuff you can do with it. Honestly, you just have to play with it for a little while before you can even start to comprehend all the stuff you can. You can actually integrate the software with the rest of your RGB settings on the other Corsair equipment you might have and make them all in sync. It's really cool. One of the most unique features about this is actually that you can set the polling rate to 4,000 megahertz. Typically keyboards have 1,000 megahertz, which means every second your keyboard sends 1,000 signals to your computer. But with this one, you can crank that up to 4,000. So basically you'll be sending 4,000 signals every second. And what that means is that you should have a faster response time, because every second you'll have more signals being sent, so it'll pick up when you register a key faster. So you can expect about a 0.75 millisecond advantage over someone else who doesn't have the software. Personally, I don't think you'll be able to tell much of a difference. 0.75 milliseconds isn't that much, but it is an improvement and it can be measured. So in that regard, you could say this keyboard's faster than most of the ones out there. That 4,000 megahertz polling rate is absolutely insane. It's also really nice that Corsair is trying to up the speed side of things through the software and the hardware on the keyboard, instead of reiterating the switch over and over and making it more uncomfortable just so that it actuates like a millisecond faster. I'm looking at you, Razer, because your switches are really uncomfortable. Keep in mind your CPU will have to sort through all those extra signals, so if you have a slower CPU, it might slow things down a bit. So in that case, you would probably want to stick with 1,000 polling rate. Make sure your computer is up to specs. On my computer, I have an Intel i5-9400, and I saw about a 2 to 3% increase in the CPU usage when I turned on the 4,000 polling rate. So on a decent, mid-range CPU, I did see a minor increase. So it's not insignificant, but it's not a huge draw either, so keep that in mind. So back in the day with other Corsair keyboards, you were limited to 5 profiles on each keyboard. Corsair is using dynamic space usage, so instead of being limited to 5 profiles, you can have up to 200. I played around with it for a while, and I could never really hit that limit even after just trying a ton of different things. 200 is way more than you'll ever need. Just keep in mind, once you hit that 8 megabit onboard storage, then you won't be able to add any more. But who out there is going to have 200 people using one keyboard anyways? So besides all of the software, there are some cool changes that Corsair made to this keyboard from previous iterations. First off, the stabilizers are not rattly. That was my biggest complaint about the K95, is each time you hit the space bar, it was like an earthquake. It was so rattly, you could hear the stabilizer bar shaking and everything was just really rattly. This one is a big improvement. It's like a normal space bar. It's not incredibly smooth feeling or thocky. It's just, it's a space bar that doesn't suck. And I have to give props to Corsair, because that was one of the biggest things that I personally didn't like about the old Corsair keyboard. And I mean, it's not amazing by any standards, but the keyboard is more fun to type on, and you can actually use it to type an essay or something without being, constantly distracted by those loud. And the standard bottom row is finally here. So that means that you can swap out the keycaps on this keyboard without a problem. You can just buy a set on Amazon or anywhere else, and you can just swap them out. no worries about if it will fit or not. That was a big upgrade, and for someone who likes a wide variety of different keycaps and trying out different stuff, this is a lifesaver for me. Speaking of keycaps, these have been upgraded to a cleaner font and sleeker looking design. Before they were much bigger and I guess more gamery type looking. Now they're more sleek and minimalistic. Overall, it's a big improvement. Instead of like a cheap gamery feel, now they're more of a sleek gamery feel. That itself is a big improvement in my opinion. Programmable keys have a new design. They're now more of a gunmetal color instead of the old textured feel. In the box they also include the textured keycaps as well, so you can swap them out. But having this really nice color really accents the rest of the keyboard, and it just ties everything together with the color of the volume wheel and the color of the keycaps. You also get a keycap puller in the box, so you can swap out the keycaps at your own convenience. One of my favorite upgrades is that the case is smaller and less bulky. They cut off like a section off the bottom that was sort of there, but didn't really do anything or add to the experience. Now you have more features and functionality packed into a smaller board, and I think that's just amazing. I like where Corsair's headed with that, and it kind of reminds me of cell phones, you know, like back in the day cell phones were much bigger and bulkier, but then over time they sort of made them more sleek, and they made them more small and basically more compact, while also making everything inside much faster. And I really like that keyboards are sort of headed that same direction as well. The programmable macro keys come in a gunmetal design that looks really cool and matches the rest of the design. The RGB is more prominent than ever. So you have the per key RGB lighting, but you also have lighting on the sides and then across the front of the board. Basically, this makes whatever RGB you have come out the sides of your keyboard and look better altogether. The wrist rest is also improved too. Before it used to attach with plastic feet, but they switched them to magnetic, so instead they just clip on instead of having to like shove them in and making sure that the plastic feet align. It just clips right on. It's much more convenient. Also, the entire surface is covered with a mesh material, whereas before there was like a plastic outline and then the mesh material on the inside. I think the new design choice is much better and much more comfortable. They also added a nice Corsair sting on the wrist rest along with the little yellow accent box. So it kind of ties everything together too. One thing I really like about this whole keyboard is the Corsair branding. On the previous iterations, they had, you know, the Corsair in big words on the top of the forehead, and instead they removed that, and now they just have the logo in the center, and everything looks much more symmetric and better if you ask me. K100 is also printed on the side of the board, and it kind of reminds me of like the root file of a computer. It just has K100 on it. It looks really sleek, really simple, and I'm all for it. There are also multiple kickstand adjustments on the back, which make it really versatile for a variety of different typing angles. So you can change it back here, and instead of just one, you have two. So more convenient for everyone. All of the new additions that Corsair added to this keyboard make it an all-in-one like utility monster. If I had to stick with one keyboard that would sit on my desk and I needed it for any situation, I would probably go with this one. This is sort of an endgame keyboard if you think about it. Not in terms of super high quality premium feel and sound like you would with a custom keyboard, more in the terms of the functionality and the utility that it brings to the table. Of course, there are some features that were on previous models that are also on this one, so I'm going to run through those really quickly. I mainly wanted to look at the things that Corsair had changed first. Some of the old stuff that's still here includes the dedicated media keys on the top right. Those just make it easy to change sound settings if you're in a full screen application. So without exiting, you can skip a song, pause, hit play. You also have the volume wheel that's full aluminum, and you can just scroll up and down and change the sound levels. Also a mute button if you're getting sick of your song or sick of listening to music. The build quality is also very similar. It has an aluminum top plate and a plastic bottom side. And it feels a little bit less creaky than previous models, but it still has that same standard design. But if you try and twist it, there isn't a whole lot of twist to it or creakiness. And that's pretty good for a keyboard of this size with the full size layout and then all of this additional stuff on top. Usually you expect it to be a bit more flexible, but this holds up pretty well. The keyboard comes with Cherry Speed Silver switches, which makes them a little bit faster for gaming because they have a shorter actuation distance, so you don't have to press them quite as far for the key to register. That makes them a little bit better for competitive gaming. Not to mention they're backed up with the Cherry MX name, which is actually a really big deal because Cherry goes through really strenuous testing on all of their switches. And they're one of the few switches out there that will last for up to 100 million keystrokes or even more. Some people out there actually like to use the Ergonomics, which is past their 100 million keystroke limit because they feel more worn in, and I guess they're more satisfying to use. USB pass-through is also super convenient. You know, you just plug it into your PC, and then you have an extra port right on your keyboard where you can plug in an additional device, such as a game controller, a microphone, or, you know, an SD card. The only trade-off with going with USB pass-through over another type of cable is that it's non-detachable, which makes the keyboard a bit more clunky. Sometimes it's really nice if you have a detachable cable so you can unplug it and then, you know, swap it out for another keyboard really quickly. And if you do a lot of keyboard reviews, that's really convenient. But for someone who's going to set this keyboard on their desk and never move it again, it doesn't really matter. Having the detachable cable is something I prefer over having USB pass. Plus, you know, you get to use a custom cable, which is nice. There's also the functionality to lock your Windows key, you know, in case you accidentally hit it when gaming. It won't open up another window. That was pretty standard feature on other Corsair keyboards. There are other key combinations you can lock as well. I think like Control-Alt and a few other ones. You can change all that through the software though. And I mean, that's about it. I think I covered everything and all the changes on this keyboard. I gotta say, I have to give props to Corsair for constantly upgrading their keyboards and making them more and more impressive. I mean, I wasn't the biggest fan of the K95, but the K100 I feel like anyone could pick up and really enjoy. I guess the real question though is it worth the $230 price tag? Because that's a really steep price. And I think it could be for the right people. If you have a job, you know, or a hobby where having all this utility at your fingertips will save you time and precious seconds when you're trying to navigate whatever application you're using, then yeah, I think this is totally worth it. I'm sure for a lot of gamers out there, the ASON software and faster pulling rate is a selling point all in itself. Anything that gives you a measurable performance increase in game will have people opening their wallets in no time. So Corsair was pretty smart with the increased pulling rate. What do you think about keyboard manufacturers constantly increasing the price of their keyboards? Personally, I'm okay with it as long as they continue to innovate and add new features, stuff that we didn't even know we needed, like the increased pulling rate. But I could see it really getting carried away in the future. If you look at the newest iPhone or the newest Samsung, they're well into the $1,000 range. And I don't know about you guys, but I'm not willing to pay for a keyboard that will eventually get up to a price like that. Hopefully there's some limitations to how crazy it gets, but on one hand, I really enjoy the new technology and the new stuff that Corsair is bringing. But on the other hand, I feel like there needs to be a point where things are just too expensive. Like you just draw the line and you say, okay, don't go over this price point. But at the end of the day, it's the consumer who sets the trend for how expensive they're willing to pay for something. Anyway, that about does it for this review. Please hit the like button if you found this helpful and informative. Thank you. Have a good one, guys.